Ecuador, after pressure from the indigenous movement, several officials of Guillermo Lazo's government resigned to their posts. Colombia's President-elect Gustavo Petro will ask the ELN guerrillas and all armed groups in the countries for a bilateral ceasefire. In the UK, Chancellor Rishi Sunak and Health Minister Sajid Javid resigned, and both former senior officials took aim at Prime Minister Johnson's ability to run an administration that adherent to standards. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Ecuador, after pressure from the indigenous movement, several officials of Guillermo Lazo's government resigned to their posts. At least 4 members of Lazo's cabinet, among them the Minister of Economy, Simon Cueva, presented their resignation after receiving serious accusations during the national strike. The sign was received and accepted by the Ecuadorian president, who expressed his gratitude for the loyal and available services given to the outgoing authorities in the exercise of their functions. Meanwhile, President Lazo is expected to announce ministerial and institutional changes in his cabinet as a result of the demand of demonstrators in the recent national strikes. The President of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, acknowledged during the celebration of the 211th anniversary of the signing of the Act of Independence the role of the civil-military union in defense of the national sovereignty. Celebration event for another anniversary of the signing of the Act of Declaration of Independence and the date of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces began on Tuesday with the raising of the national flag at the National Pantheon Monumental Complex and a tribute to the father of the nation, Simón Bolívar. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro recognized in a speech the spirit of courage of the Venezuelan National Armed Force and the civic military union in defense of the country's sovereignty. The president also emphasized that the values of the armed forces are based on the ideology of the liberator Simón Bolívar.
The Bolivarian National Armed Force, today as never before, united in values and ideals, and in the historical project of the liberator Simón Bolívar, the project of Republican reconstruction that our beloved Supreme Commander Hugo Rafael Chávez Frías rescued and brought for this and future generations.
Through its official Twitter account, the Venezuelan embassy in Dominica announced that the ambassador from China, Cuba, and Dominica joined Bolivarian Ambassador José de Rubio Moros in the commemoration of the 211th anniversary of the independence of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. In the same line, the ambassador of Dominica to Venezuela and ALBA TCP national coordinator, His Excellency Ambrose George, congratulated Venezuelan people and their leaders for having succeeded in defending Venezuela's independence and sovereignty throughout 211 years. In Argentina, a federal court sentenced to life imprisonment the 4 members holders involved in the death of flights, the method of extermination favorite by the dictatorship in the country between 1976 and 1983. The Federal Court of San Martin imposed a sentence against the former commander of the Military Institute Santiago Omar Riveros and the members of the aviation Luis del Valle, Delcy Malacolza, and Eduardo Lanzas, who are responsible for the kidnapping, torture, and murder of students Juan Carlos Rosel and Adrian Acrecian Beni and Roberto Arce Vila. a militant of the Revolutionary Workers' Party, and another militant of movement, Rosa Eugenia Novillo, who was also pregnant. After a trial of almost 2 years, the sentence acquired an unprecedented relevance because it finally recognizes the Argentinian Army use its plans in the flights.
Point 6. The sentence Luis del Valle Arce, whose other personal conditions were stated in the preamble, to life imprisonment and perpetual absolute disqualification from legal advisors for being considered criminally responsible co-perpetrator of the following crimes that concur in real form: illegal home invasion committed by a public official in the case of Juan Carlos Rosas, unlawful detention committed by a public official in abuse of his functions, aggravated by violence and repeated threats on 3 occasions that materially concur to the detriment of Adrián Enrique Crescin Beni, Juan Carlos Rosase, and Rosa Novillo Covavalan.
At the end of a trial against repressors convicted by the Argentina Federal Court, Pablo Llanto, plaintiff attorney for the victim's side, acknowledged the enormous value of the trial and the ruling of the case of human rights.
The sentence is undoubtedly valuable. It adds to a large number of sentences in this sense, but it has an added value. It is the first time that those responsible for death flights have been given names and surnames, and this is the first time that they have received convictions as well. It was about time. This was the method of extermination that shamefully characterized the country, and its perpetrators were enjoying a peaceful life for decades in Argentina.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Colombia's President-elect Gustavo Petro will ask the ELN guerrilla and all armed groups in the country for a bilateral ceasefire. Petro, in an interview with W Radio, launched a message that a time for peace has come. In addition, he called for the beginning of judicial negotiations in the majority and political negotiations in the minority to achieve the end of war in Colombia. Since Petro won the elections last June 19th, the ELN has reiterated in separate statements its willingness to resume the peace negotiations that began with former President Juan Manuel Santos in 2017 in Quito and were taken in 2018 in Havana.
The message that I have sent not only to the ELN, but to all existing armed groups today in Colombia is that the time for peace has come. Through several instruments, what I'm requesting is a ceasefire, which will be bilateral. And I ask for the beginning of judicial negotiations in the majority of the cases, and political negotiations in the minority of the cases, to achieve the end of the war in Colombia.
The 43rd Summit of Head of Governments of the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, concluded in Suriname with a focus of trade and coordination and cooperation as well. During the meeting, they discussed the process of the agricultural system agenda, climate financing, security issues, and severed to update the protocols of COVID-19. The Prime Minister of Feliz, John Briceño, emphasized the need to put an end to the economic, commercial, and financial blockade posed by the U.S. against Cuba and urged the attempts to make efforts to achieve, among all, the lifting of the blockade. In addition, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, during his speech stated that countries should be aware of the danger that lie ahead, specifically the global crisis and climate change. The government of Peru reached an agreement with transport unions to end the strike, which was affecting major Peruvian cities. New agreements were reached between the transportation companies and the representative of Pedro Castillo governments. The leaders of the transport chamber points out that talks continue and at least 16 transport units will return to the streets to resume their activities. The data signed by the executive and transport workers done up at the headquarters of the Ministry of Transport leaves without effects the community of strike, which began in the early hours of Monday, affecting 80% of German public transport. Minister Juan Barranzuela emphasized that the demands of transport workers are currently being discussed by technical teams forming work tables.
We are building trust together. Transport workers have not only come today to deal with issues that were pending, but they have gone much further than that. They have brought technical and technological proposals that will begin to be discussed directly with the sector starting tomorrow, and that workers will join the technical table that has been set up in order to work together on new approaches that will even modernize the systems being worked on in the three manners of transport.
Local police in Illinois, the United States, said the man cause of open fire at a 4th of July parade in wealthy Chicago suburban plan has his attack for weeks and wore women's clothing to facilitate his escape. Armed with a rifle similar to an AR-15 revolver, Robbie Cremo opened fire on the crowd from the roof of a building as hundreds of residents attend the traditional U.S. National Day Parade. At least 6 people were killed and 26 others were injured. Deputy Police Chief Christopher Covelli said the motive for the attack had not been established, but they believe Cremo planned them in advance for several weeks. Covelli said that the moment of his capture, the man was dressed in women's clothing. Investigators believe he did so to conceal facial tattoos and his identity and to facilitate his escape along with other people feeling the same. The United Nations organization said that unemployment, debt, civil violence, and educational exclusion are some of the risks triggered by the COVID-19. The international organization warned in a report about the difficult conditions unleashed by the COVID-19, particularly for vulnerable people around the world. According to the UN, the agricultural sector has been one of the most affected. They also disclosed that in many places women suffer disproportionately the excelling gender basis in society. The text also referred to the global consequences of the conflict in Ukraine. Meanwhile, they warned that the world depends on a complex network that, if it's established, can have devastating global effects. We have more news coming up after this final short break, so don't go away. Welcome back. Britain's Chancellor Rishi Sunak resigned from Boris Johnson's cabinet in protest of the Prime Minister's leadership. Sunak is the second senior official in Johnson's cabinet to resign in the last few minutes. Moments earlier, British Health Secretary Sir David tendered his resignation from the Prime Minister's cabinet, stating he can no longer, in good consensus, continue serving in this government. On Twitter, Sunak wrote, "The public rightly expects the government to be conducted properly, completely and seriously. I recognize this might be my last ministerial job, but I believe these standards are worth fighting for, and I am resigning." David said many lawmakers and the public had lost confidence in Johnson's ability to govern in the national interest. In the United Kingdom, the Bank of England warns that the global economic outlook has worsened markedly. A rise in commodity prices led to high inflation around the world, presenting a downside risk over the coming months. The instability of energy and commodity costs created a considerable risk of disruption that could amplify economic shocks in the future. According to Andrew Bailey, Governor of the Bank of England, developments related to Russia's invasion, special military operation in Ukraine are a key aspect that will impact the global outlook. This is part of the Financial Stability Report from the Financial Policy Committee, where officials said they will conduct annual tests and assess a further rise in interest rates. Algeria celebrates on Tuesday the 60th anniversary of its independence after 132 years of French colonialism, a period that still casts a shadow over the continent. After lying at the martyrs shared in Algiers, President Abdel Nahim Tebboune, accompanied by the army, reviewed the activities and parades. After almost 8 years of war, the 60th anniversary is commemorated with the presence of Algerian authorities. Algeria is thus receiving a highly symbolic military tradition that has not been celebrated for at least 3 decades. White robe worshippers from around the world have packed the streets of Mina, Islam holy city, ahead of the biggest had pilgrimage since the coronavirus pandemic began. Banners welcoming the faithful, including the first international visitors since 2019, adorned squares and alleys, while armed security forces patrol the ancient city, birthplaces of the Prophet Muhammad. 1 million people, including 850,000 from abroad, are allowed to this year after 2 years of drastically curtailed numbers due to the pandemic. This pilgrimage is one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which all able-bodied Muslims with the means are required to perform at least once. Local authorities have reported that at least 650,000 overseas pilgrims have arrived so far in Saudi Arabia. In Russia, the Minister of Industry and Trade, Denis Manturov, stressed the stability and supply of industries despite Western sanctions. The minister assured that the situation in goods and consumer markets as well as raw materials has established. Manturov declared that Russia's government took the necessary measures to make imports more flexible, which helped to overcome the first economic shock. Since the end of February, the U.S. and European Union had intensified the economic war. Since the beginning of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, more than 8,400 sanctions against Moscow have been activated, in addition to the 2,695 sanctions already in force since 2014. On Tuesday, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu stated that some of the weapons that the West is sending to Ukraine are spreading across the Middle East and ended up in the black market.
The conflict in Ukraine, the West is continuing large-scale arms supplies to Kyiv regime. The country had received more than 28,000 tons of military cargo so far. According to the information at our disposal, some of the foreign weapons supplied by the West to the Ukraine are spreading across the Middle Eastern region and are also ending up on the black market.
The Chinese army carried out military exercises in sea waters with the aim of strengthening its defensive military capabilities and sending a message against Western attempts to affect its interests. The exercise was carried out in Chinese territorial water near the Diaoyu Islands, Islet headquartered in the South China Sea and which are in dispute with Japan. According to the authorities, this exercise seeks to reinforce the defensive capabilities of the Asian giant to face the growing threats in the international scenario. The government of China on several occasions has shown its willingness to maintain a policy of peace. However, they assure that the exercise is a message to attempts to intervene and destabilize the region. teleSUR English continues to grow. The signal now reach Europe, and you can order it from your cable dealer or tune it yourself. These parameters you see it on the screen are in place since July the 1st. Quite soon, further changes will be implemented for the signal in the Middle East and Africa. And now, more than ever, the world connects to us, and our stories are being heard all around the globe. This news multi-platform will continue providing trustful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. With that story, we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also join us on our socials. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram as well. For teleSUR English and from the South, I'm Ana Marrero, and thank you for watching.